bus. All right, so you had a really interesting piece, I thought, in The Athletic last week about the ride to the stadium for a Super Bowl. What is that bus ride like, and what kind of thoughts and emotions are you having as an executive on that ride in?
You know, Jim, it's the greatest ride of all, but it's really like it's a funhouse ride because you're going to get off the roller coaster and you're going to be like Brett Veach flying home after the game, just completely devastated by what just happened. I had that bus ride home when we lost to the Tampa Bay Bucks in San Diego when I was with the Raiders. It's just painful. But the ride there, you're filled with joy, the emotion. You tell yourself, no matter what happens, we've had a great year. You try to convince yourself that it's going to be okay, and you're thinking of different ways the way the game is going to go. You're thinking of how this is going to play out. And as much as I thought about that game, and I wrote 2 columns for The Athletic last week on the game, I never thought it was going to go that way. I thought the Chiefs would have figured out how to at least move the ball. Did I think they were going to get held without a touchdown? Absolutely not. That, to me, was striking. So that bus ride is filled with how you think the game is going to go.
So if you are Brett Veach, what is the first order of business for you in the offseason?
You basically go right back to saying, look, what wins in the National Football League, what has always won in the National Football League is blue-chip offensive linemen, blue-chip defensive linemen, and a quarterback. Every mock draft from here on, Jim, we'll see 5 receivers in the top 10. We'll see, 20 receivers in the first round. Let's get this really clear. You can't win if you can't block them. Bill Walsh used to say to me all the time, the last position we're going to fix on the team is the receivers because we need to be able to protect first. If we don't protect the quarterback, we'll never get the ball to receivers. I think that was Brett Veach's painful lesson. He played with 5 journeyman offensive linemen last night. He shouldn't have got as far as he gotten with those 5 journeyman offensive linemen. But the real issue is because he's so great at quarterback, he was as John Madden used to say, he was the deodorant to hide the smell of their offensive line. And that made Brett Veach think he had a chance. And I think the reality set in on that bus ride back to the airport.
So, Michael, before I let you go, Michael Lombardi, my guest, you've been around some of the greatest minds in the history of the sport. You mentioned John Madden, you mentioned a Belichick, you mentioned a Parcells, a Bill Walsh. And I'm sure that you've taken a little something from every one of these guys you've been around. Who is the best football mind, though, you've ever been around?
Well, it would be Belichick because I was able to at least have a conversation. But I think we all really everything starts and ends with Al Davis. His brilliance, his understanding of the game. Like, for example, Jim, everybody would be talking about Kansas City and what they didn't do. At the end of the half, Al Davis would have been absolutely furious with Andy Reid when they came out of the 2-minute warning and there was time left on the clock and they threw a pass to Tyreek Hill when he went out of bounds. Al Davis would have gone berserk over that because that stopped the clock. That gave Tampa Bay another timeout. That play should have been a run. That should have been a run or stay in bounds pass. And then you let that clock go all the way down and call timeout with 1 second. Now you've got 2nd and 7, second and 8, and you can throw the ball, and you're going to take a lot of time off, and they're never going to be allowed to score. Those are the kind of things that Al Davis was way ahead of everybody else.
I was going to say, finally, Michael, what's it like to have a managing general partner or an owner who's a football guy through and through? Like, you're looking around the NFL right now, and you see, monstrous business guys. What was it like to work for an owner that knew football?
It was really remarkable. I mean, as he got older in life, it became much more difficult because of health and other issues. But to me, it was Bill Walsh told me, the reason I worked there, Jim, is that I wrote about it in my book, is I was driving Coach Walsh around, and he said, the most football I ever learned in my life was working for Al Davis. And that's truly what was the case. He taught me game management. Bill Parcells is Bill Parcells, and he'd be the first to admit this to you. Al Davis taught him game management, how to manage a game, pace a game, and win the game. And Bill just took it all in. And that tenet is missing in a lot of NFL head coaches today.
All right, so finally, now that football is over, Michael, what are you betting on? What are we all to bet on now? What are you looking at now?
I think we're going to bet on a lot of quarterbacks changing. I mean, look, San Francisco's made it abundantly clear they're going to change out quarterbacks. They've been on everybody. They've been on Stafford. They're in on Wentz. They're in on everybody. So I think we're going to have this quarterback carousel that I'm not sure where it's going to stop or who's going to get on and who's going to get off. And I think the quarterbacks in the draft probably will be a tad overrated because of desperation of these teams that need quarterbacks so badly, not because they're being courageous.
And then finally, Garoppolo, if San Francisco makes that move, is there any way that he ends up anywhere other than New England?
I think that's the perfect place for him because they know him and they know what he can do. I think Jimmy in the San Francisco scheme has certainly been proven successful. I mean, he took them to a Super Bowl. But what people don't understand about San Francisco, Jim, and this is really very clear on tape, they can't pass protect in a drop-back game. They cannot pass protect in a drop-back game. Their quarterback gets killed in drop-back passes, so they always have to play from in front. And if they have to ever throw a drop-back pass, it's really a problem.
Nobody better. I could do this for the next 2 hours. He is an NFL insider for The Athletic. You can read him there. He is the co-host of the GM Shuffle podcast. You can listen to him there. He is also an author. He is a 3-time Super Bowl winner. And, Michael, I love the fact that you knew that Rav used to come on this show back in the day. So the next time you talk to him, which I know will be soon, tell him I said what's up.
Thanks, Jim.
If you're one of those people who want a little coin, it's much easier to navigate because you're jacked up on the kind of high that only gambling can give you. Enter one James John Kelly, the digital content director for the Jim Rome radio show. More importantly, the gambling guru around here. Now, if you listen to the show this past Friday, you know that James Kelly, a.k.a. the Big Head, made his normal appearance in his normal spot with his normal picks. However, after he took the Chiefs -3 to beat the Bucs in the Super Bowl, the Big Head announced that he was actually rooting against himself, rooting against his own pick, rooting against his 65% accuracy rate for the regular season, although down to just above 50 in the postseason. None of that mattered, because even though he thought that the Chiefs would win and would cover the 3, he wanted them to lose. That's right, because James Kelly was holding on to a 60-1 futures ticket that would have paid him $3,000 if he won. Well, if Tampa Bay won. So if you're new to gambling, a futures bet is exactly what it sounds like. It's a bet placed on something happening in the future. For example, right now, you can bet on who's going to win the Super Bowl next year. And since the future is so tough to predict because of all the variables, you'll actually get really nice odds and a really good value on every team, including the best teams in the NFL, because we're so far out and so many things can happen. So 371 days prior, more than a year ago, the Big Head dropped $50 on the Bucs to win the Super Bowl. Doesn't sound like a big swing, right? $50. Who cares? Yeah, $50 at 60-1 odds. That means that $50 bet, if you're willing to wait and you're patient, he could turn that into $3,000. Keep in mind, the reason that he got 60-1 was because he got in before Tom Brady got to town. You would never get those numbers otherwise. So Vic and NoCal asked the very obvious question that we all had after we heard that. Quote, you made that bet 12 months ago before Tampa Bay had Brady. What was your thought at that time? That Brady might go there? That Jameis Winston was coming back strong? End quote. It's a great question. The deck wrote back, and I quote, they had a great roster before Brady got there. From positions 2 through 53, if they got any above average quarterback who didn't throw it to the other team 30 times, they were going to be in it. End of quote. Check out my dude, the deck, flexing futures knowledge all over the World Wide Web. Just dragging his stones around like, don't ask me how I did this. Ask you how you didn't. So, we learned about this monster futures bet on Friday. After the show, James Kelly tweets what would become a great jungle storyline over the weekend. Quote, Jim Rome show producer, Adam Hawk is offering me a $100 buy-in. He wants $400 back if the Bucs win. Should I accept? End quote. All right, so that's kind of intriguing on a number of different levels. First off, Hawk betting on sports is the upset of the century. I don't think anybody saw that coming. But I do see the bird working. $100 from Hawk, or at least this is how Hawk would argue it. $100 to the deck. That covers his ticket and then some. Remember, the flight deck paid $50. So if he loses that bet, he gets his money back and an extra $50 on top from Hawk. Now, if he wins that bet, he still pockets $2,600 instead of $3,000. And both he and Hawk are partying together, which is probably the last thing that the deck wants to do. Hang out with Hawk, party with Hawk. But still, $2,600 is a pretty big return on a 50-bone investment. So on the level, it's a pretty solid offer, I guess, from Hawk. Problem for Hawk is Twitter pretty much hates his guts. And the majority of people in the deck's mentions told him to pass, including more than one person who wrote, quote, F Hawk. Apparently, Deck was thinking the same thing because after radio silence on Saturday, he tweets on Sunday right before the game, quote, I'm not cutting in Adam Hawk. I'd rather lose the bet and miss out on $3K than give him even a $400 taste of it. He's out. Offer denied. End of quote. Straight rejection fire. James John Kelly, if you need him. That's right. And Hawk really, really needed him. Because JJ cashed in hard last night. And it wasn't even a sweat. Man, you could tell that ticket was a winner after the first couple of series in that game. And the only thing more intelligent than betting that 371 days out was not cutting anybody in on it, because now the deck is collecting 100% of 3K and not 87% of it. Hawk wanted a piece. He got nothing. James Kelly wanted the whole cake. He got the whole cake. He ate it too. So a big win for JK, an even bigger win for Hawk Hater Nation. Great storyline. Good job. Well done, Flight Deck. Sucks for you, Hawk. Man up, dude. Grow a pair. You got to get in with us when we get in and take the real gamble. However, speaking of gambling, that was not the only bit of XR4TI gambling out of the weekend. Turns out that Garrett Ritt was running a Super Bowl Squares pool. Because, of course, Ritt was. The only thing more predictable than Ritt running a Squares pool is when CBS Sports Network cut to an unexpected shot of the control room on Friday. Ritt was straight up inhaling peanut butter pretzels by the mouthful on camera. It is so on brand. You would have thought that we planned it. Quite the opposite. Those knuckleheads thought that the plan was not to shoot the control room all day. So Ritt thought he could have himself a one-man feast in the back row, and he got caught. Peanut butter handed. Not surprising at all. Anyway, Ritt runs a Squares pool yesterday because Ritt is a sports degenerate to the nth degree. Like we all love sports. There's no way we could have ended up in this if we didn't. But not like Ritt. Ritt has an unhealthy, childlike obsession with sports. His office, and again, this guy's like 70. His office looks like a Dave & Buster's. He's the guy who constantly says we, when talking about his teams. Like he's on the team. We did this. We won. We lost. We're better than them. Like he's not even a fan boy. He's a fan child. Ritt's Twitter feed is so cluttered with cliches. You'd think it was like a satire account of a sports junkie. This guy will live tweet games that no one is watching and ignore all the signs that he needs to stop. You know, signs like 0 likes, 0 retweets, 0 comments. Case in point, yesterday morning, Ritt tweets, quote, "That's the worst goalkeeping I've ever seen. I'm totally here for it. Anytime you pass it back to the keeper, you 100% deserve what you get when it's botched. The play should be banned. It is the worst play in sports, yet it's also the best when it goes to hell. Hashtag EPL. Hashtag Liverpool." Like that amazing and fiery, straight fire, passionate insight into international soccer goalkeeping netted him 0 likes, 0 retweets, and 0 comments. And despite the audience continually telling Ritt that they're just not interested in his uninteresting sports tweets, man, he just keeps thumbing them out. because that's who he is and that's what he does. So, Rit running a squares pool is par for the course. And guess who was the big winner of the Rit